let's bring in Ogbugo Ukoha, the Executive Director of Distribution Systems, Storage and Retailing Infrastructure at the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, right? Or authority. All right, very warm welcome. One big fish that we've been waiting for all these periods during scarcity and rest. Let's start with regulation. We definitely will talk about petroleum. What are the key, instruments in this 2023 regulations of the midstream and downstream operations in the oil industry?
Okay, thank you, Christian and Amaka, for having me over. First, this is one of the highlights as the authority management approaches its 18th month in operation, trying to operationalize the Petroleum Industry Act, which was assented to in 2021 August by Mr. President. We've worked tirelessly during that period, trying to integrate 2.5 legacy agencies and putting forward a strong regulatory framework. Regarding the regulations, these are grandparented actually, by the Petroleum Industries Act. In its section 33, in more than 25 subsections, A to Y, it sets out themes and areas that regulations have to be provided for. And then it goes further in section 216 to talk about how those will be drafted and become law. The universally accepted process for putting forward regulations is that first you would have to draft that, then you will propose it, and then you receive responses from the public, and you would hold a public hearing, and you will review feedbacks received, and then gazette it. And this is the procedure outlined by section 216 of the PIA as well, which we followed. We drafted it. We had a team of in-house staff with over 500 years cumulative experience, working to produce 20 draft regulations. And thereafter, we published it on the website, on newspapers, and invited comments from the public, from stakeholders. And these were reviewed. We sat back and we had stakeholders engagements, both at the Hilton and other venues, thrice over the last 6 months. And we got very rich feedbacks from stakeholders.
That's what formed the corpus of this.
Okay, so that's the process. Yes. Thank you for walking us through the process in terms of what you've done, going by the provisions of the PIA. But you haven't really gone in depth to really talk to Nigerians who are very concerned about, petroleum in Nigeria. Some would argue the fact that Nigeria is blessed, we're not supposed to be going through what we're going through. So I ask you, what are some of those highlights from this new laws that Nigerians should be excited about that will make our lives easier?
Okay, so out of 20 that we've drafted and held stakeholder engagements, last week 6 were gazetted, and we unveiled it a few days ago. First one out of those is the midstream and downstream operations regulations. That regulation sets out different licenses for you to operate, the duties and obligations of the licensee, the requirements to obtain that, penalties and conditions for holding those licenses. You also have the second one that's the assignment and transfer of licenses and permits. When you have a license or permit, over time you might want to change your name, you might want to sell your interest. Again, this sets out the procedure for that and the fees and sanctions and penalties if these licenses are unlawfully transferred to others.
Good regulatory framework, like you said, more than 500 years, went into this. But let's look at, the issue and of bridging gas, for example, how does your authority bridge the gap in gas pricing and the domestic spiraling of the costs of gas? Because that's one of, the tax before you. Then 2 is the issue of petroleum transportation and pricing as well. How are you addressing this issue? Would you be stepping on the toes of those in charge of equalization? Should petrol be selling at the same cost from your Atlas Cove depot to Mosimi in Ibadan, to the one in Suleja, and to the one in Kaduna and Kanu?
Okay, so let me take it to the sequence you've asked.
Okay.
First, let me deal with the bit about gas pricing and gaps. So one of the 6 regulations that has been promulgated is the gas pricing and domestic demand regulations. That gas pricing takes the PIA and sets out how the supplies domestically will be done in relation to gas to power, gas to gas-based industries, and the commercials. It makes provisions for quality and pricing and signals to the industry how the open market system will be achieved. So that's that. If you recall, the PIA as well creates a fund within the authority, the Midstream and Downstream Gas Infrastructure Investment Fund. Once collections begin to get put together, the authority will be looking forward to making investments in a manner that will reduce gas flares and also give comfort to other investors that de-risks the value chain so that investors can come make investments. When we begin to...
How about the domestic market? The
domestic market, there are very
positive... The price is out of hand. What can be causing that? Is it a function of a Nigerian gas company? Is it your function? The pricing gap and the bridging.
Number of variables have contributed to that. But let's look at the positive and what the outlook is. The Train 7 of the LNG is coming on soon. With that, there will be added capacity and increased output as well. And we expect that with domestic obligations, supply obligations, LPG and all will be pushed forward.
Well, some would argue that, having more doesn't necessarily translate to reduction in the price, especially in the domestic market. And this takes me to my next question. It's not fair that we'll have here and we'll not talk about, this report that came out just 2 days ago, speaking about the fact that when subsidy actually will be removed, because we do know that
you're going to increase petrol to 750 naira.
Nigerians should expect it to get as high as 750 naira. Yes, we know subsidy has to go, because that money that 1 trillion naira is what experts would say is what Nigeria can save from the removal of subsidy. That can go into other sectors, but we do know the ripple effect. Paying 750 naira per liter.
Is the authority planning that? Let's just put the question straight.
I'll caution into, I'll set a bit caution that it's unhelpful when we rush into speculating what prices might be. We can speak about the variables that will contribute to ultimately what the price will be and how we can mitigate that as well. But ultimately, prices will be determined by the forces of demand and supply.
Market forces?
Oh, yes, that's if you deregulate the market.
Do you want to put a benchmark? But the market is deregulated,
certainly,
but you're still controlling it.
We will not cap price. I tell you what we will do. The PIA in section 32 and 33 gives the authority clear powers to develop cost benchmarks, pricing and tariff frameworks. In real terms, we're working towards how we can mitigate and eliminate cost inefficiencies. And I can list many cost inefficiencies. We will, for instance, borrow a leaf from our neighbors who have worked with their central bank to create pools. Because if you can dedicate sourcing of dollars, it will also reduce the exposure to the.
And if the refineries are working,
you're just taking it out of my mouth.
Well,
because once the refineries are working, you will also protect the naira from the shocks of the international.
Even though we know the international market, allowing the demand and supply determine the price, but the truth is, right now in Nigeria, the price is not uniform. What is obtainable here in Abuja is not the same obtainable somewhere in Akwa Ibom. So are you guaranteeing us that even when subsidy is removed, we'll see an equal price for petroleum products in Nigeria? No. Is that even possible, first of all?
So when we eliminate some of the cost inefficiencies, I do not expect that the differences here or there, it might be a question of few nairas and kobos.
Particularly when it comes to the issue of transportation and the rest, and we're saying that's where the equalization issue comes in too.
Yes.
Well, let's thank you so very much. Ogbugo Ukoha is the Executive Director of Distribution Systems, quite a number of portfolios under there at the Nigerian Downstream and Midstream Petroleum Authority. Thanks. I'm sure we'll still find a time for you to come on an expanded program so that you can give more perspective and answer more on the issue of petroleum pricing.
And thank you for having me here, especially with the cues of
Ogbugo, thank you so much for being here.